Before we start, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. She was laughing, not loudly, not exaggerated. Just that short, genuine laugh that escapes when you've just heard something ridiculous on your phone. A friend's voice message probably, or some meme that caught her off guard at exactly the right moment. The sound died in her throat. The instant red and blue lights painted the storefront window behind her in rotating streaks of color. She hadn't even crossed the street yet. She was standing on the sidewalk, phone still in her hand, the echo of her own laughter still warm in her chest, waiting for the light to change like every other person in this city did 1,000 times a day. The patrol car rolled to a stop with the kind of deliberate slowness that announced intention. This wasn't someone pulling over to check directions. This wasn't a coincidence. Two officers emerged before a single word was exchanged. Doors opening in unison, boots hitting pavement with that particular weight that comes from authority and expectation. The taller one adjusted his belt as he approached. The other scanned the street with eyes that had already made up their mind about something. ID. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even really a request. It was a command delivered in a tone that expected immediate compliance. No clarification necessary. She blinked, confusion flickering across her face before she could control it. Her fingers instinctively moved toward her bag, then stopped. "Did something happen?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her heart had already begun that familiar acceleration, that involuntary response her body had learned long before her mind wanted to acknowledge why. The taller officer's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like the shape of one, empty of any actual warmth. "Routine stop," he said. She pulled out her ID with hands that remained steady through sheer force of will. Her fingers didn't shake when she handed it over, though something inside her chest had begun to tighten like a fist slowly closing. No report had been filed. No call had come in. No description of any suspect matched her or anyone else on this quiet street corner at 8:45 on a Thursday evening. But he looked at her like there had been. He looked at her like he was confirming something he already knew. The second officer reached for her bag without asking. His hand was already inside it before the question formed on her lips. "Is that necessary?" was she asked, keeping her voice level, keeping everything level because she knew. Everyone who looked like her knew. That tone mattered as much as words, that every reaction would be scrutinized, interpreted, used. "If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about," he replied without looking up from his search through her belongings. Her wallet, her keys, her lipstick, a receipt from the coffee shop, a book she'd been reading on her lunch break. She knew that phrase. Everyone knew that phrase. It was the verbal equivalent of a shrug, a deflection that placed the burden of proof on the person being searched rather than on the person doing the searching. But what neither of them knew, what they couldn't have known as they conducted their routine stop with the casual thoroughness of men who'd done this 100 times before, was that across the street, partially obscured by the evening foot traffic, someone had their phone raised, recording, and more importantly, someone else was listening. The stop lasted 17 minutes. 17 full minutes of standing on a public sidewalk under streetlights that had just flickered on, while her life was examined and prodded and deemed suspicious for reasons no one would articulate. Long enough for 3 cars to slow down as they passed, drivers craning their necks to see what was happening, what she'd done, already constructing narratives in their minds. Long enough for 2 pedestrians to deliberately look away, to cross to the other side of the street, to pretend they hadn't seen anything, because seeing meant the possibility of involvement, of complication, of risk. Long enough for a teenage boy with a phone to capture the entire thing, his hands remarkably steady for someone who understood exactly what he was witnessing. "Hands on the vehicle," the taller officer said. Not asked, said. She complied because what choice did she have? The metal of the patrol car's hood was still warm from the engine, almost hot against her palms. The heat radiated up through her arms as she stood there, positioned like a criminal, like someone who'd done something, while cars continued to pass and people continued to pretend not to notice. "What's the reason for the suspicion?" she asked. Her voice was too firm for someone in her position, and she knew it, But she asked anyway because silence felt like acceptance, and she wasn't ready to accept this as normal, as routine, as just the way things were. The officer exhaled through his nose, a sound of mild annoyance at having to explain himself. "Suspicious behavior?" he said. "What behavior?" The question hung in the air between them. He didn't answer, didn't even acknowledge that she'd spoken, because there was no answer. There was no behavior. There was only her standing on a sidewalk, existing in a space where her existence had been deemed inherently questionable. But what he didn't notice, what he couldn't have noticed because he'd already dismissed her as simply someone to process and release, was the radio crackling from inside the patrol car. The dispatcher's voice, tinny but clear. "Unit 47, confirm you have a report on that location." And his response, given with the casual confidence of someone who assumed no one was paying close enough attention to catch the discrepancy. "Negative, Central. Just standard procedure." Standard procedure. The phrase crackled through the radio and into the night air, recorded by the car's internal system, logged in the time-stamped dispatch records, captured by the microphone that was always running, always documenting, always creating a paper trail that most officers forgot existed until it mattered. They released her after finding nothing, because of course they found nothing. There had never been anything to find. "You're free to go," the taller officer said, handing back her ID with the same casual indifference he might use to return incorrect change at a convenience store. As if nothing had happened. As if 17 minutes of her life hadn't just been publicly suspended, examined, and deemed acceptable enough to continue. As if she should be grateful for the permission to walk away from a situation she'd never asked to be part of in the first place. She went, but she didn't forget. She could have let it go. Most people do. Most people swallow the humiliation, the anger, the sick feeling in their stomach, and they move on because fighting feels impossible, because the system is too big, because what's the point, because nothing ever changes anyway. But she had a friend who was a journalist, someone who'd built a career on asking the questions other people were too tired or too afraid to ask. Someone who believed that documentation mattered, that records existed for a reason, that truth could be excavated from the layers of official language and bureaucratic deflection if you just knew where to dig. And the video was already circulating. Not viral. Not yet. Not the kind of explosive spread that forces immediate institutional response. But enough. Enough shares in the right circles. Enough people watching. Enough whispers starting to build into something that resembled collective attention. Her journalist friend made a simple suggestion over coffee 3 days later, both of them sitting in a window booth while the morning light streamed in and made everything feel deceptively normal. "Request the incident report," she said, stirring sugar into her cup with deliberate slowness. They have to provide it. It's public record. They hadn't expected her to ask. Most people don't ask. Most people don't know they can ask. Don't know that the machinery of accountability exists even when it's hidden behind layers of process and paperwork, and the assumption that citizens won't have the time or energy or knowledge to access it. The report arrived 2 weeks later. Official letterhead, case number, date and timestamps. Everything formatted in the neutral, passive language of bureaucracy that made human interactions sound like data processing. She read the relevant section 3 times, her coffee growing cold on the table beside her. Stop initiated following anonymous tip regarding individual matching description of person of interest in ongoing investigation. Subject cooperative. No contraband found. No further action taken. Anonymous tip. She read it again. Matching description. Description of what? Description from whom? Investigation into what? The words were carefully chosen, she realized. Vague enough to provide legal cover, specific enough to sound legitimate, passive enough to avoid assigning direct responsibility to anyone who might later be held accountable. But she'd heard the radio transmission. She'd heard negative central, just standard procedure. No tip, no investigation, no description to match. Just a lie, dressed up in official language and filed away in a system that assumed no one would ever check. She requested the dispatch audio logs. They told her it would take 4 to 6 weeks to process. She waited. Her journalist friend wrote a preliminary piece about accountability and documentation. More people started watching. The audio arrived 5 weeks later. She listened to it 3 times in a row, sitting alone in her apartment with headphones on. The voices of strangers discussing her life like she was a case file, a checkbox, a routine matter. Unit 47, confirm you have a report on that location? Negative, Central. Just standard procedure. The lie was there, recorded, time-stamped, undeniable. The official report said one thing. The actual record said another. And that gap between them was where the truth lived. In the space between what was claimed and what could be proven. She made copies, digital and physical. She backed everything up. And then she sent it all, the video, the audio, the contradictory report, to the police department's Internal Affairs Division with a formal complaint that cited specific policy violations and included a detailed timeline with supporting evidence. This wasn't her story anymore. This was a pattern. This was a system. This was something bigger than one traffic stop on one Thursday evening. And that's when everything changed. There were no protests, no crowds gathering with signs, no chants echoing through downtown streets, no viral hashtags demanding immediate justice. That's not how this one worked. This was administrative process. This was Internal Affairs opening case file, IA 2024-1847. This was the Office of Professional Standards initiating a formal review. This was subpoenas for radio logs and body camera footage and shift reports and dispatch records. This was the slow, methodical machinery of accountability grinding into motion, powered not by outrage but by documentation, by evidence, by the paper trail that bureaucracies create and sometimes forget can be used against them. The video and audio together created something impossible to dismiss, too. The discrepancy between the official report and the recorded radio traffic wasn't a matter of interpretation or perspective. It was simply false, provably, undeniably false. The police chief issued a statement 2 months after the initial complaint, carefully worded, acknowledging concerns about proper protocol without admitting wrongdoing, announcing that appropriate administrative action had been taken. The taller officer was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. The second officer was transferred to a different precinct with a formal reprimand in his file. But the real turning point wasn't the individual consequences. It was what came 6 weeks after that. The department announced a series of policy changes during a community forum that had been scheduled in response to ongoing dialogue about policing practices and community trust. The kind of event that usually produced a lot of talk and very little action, where officials made vague promises about doing better, and everyone went home feeling like they'd participated in something without anything actually changing. Except this time was different. The new policies were specific, detailed, enforceable. Every stop conducted without a specific, documented complaint or dispatch call would require a supervisor-reviewed justification filed within 24 hours. Officers would be required to inform citizens of the reason for any stop before requesting identification. Annual training on implicit bias and constitutional policing would be mandatory for all officers, with completion tracked and linked to performance evaluations. Body cameras would be activated for all public interactions without exception, with failure to activate constituting a disciplinary offense. These weren't suggestions. They were policy, backed by union agreement and administrative authority. And at that community forum, after the chief had finished reading the prepared statement, after the policy director had explained the implementation timeline, they invited a community representative to speak about the impact of selective enforcement and the importance of accountability measures. She stood in the back of the room when they said her name, her stomach doing that familiar flip that came with unexpected attention. People turned to look as she made her way to the front, past rows of community members and city officials and reporters with cameras ready. She climbed the 3 steps to the stage. The microphone was adjusted to her height. The room went quiet with a particular quality of silence that comes from genuine attention rather than polite waiting. She looked out at the faces looking back at her, some curious, some supportive, some skeptical, some still deciding what they thought about all of this. She took a breath that went deeper than her lungs, pulling from somewhere in her chest where resolve lived alongside fear. "This was never about me," she said. Her voice carried across the room with a clarity that surprised her. It was about the pattern. It was about what happens when we accept routine humiliation as normal, when we shrug and say that's just how things are, when we let the gap between what's written in policy and what actually happens on the street get so wide that we forget it's even there. She paused. No one moved. I didn't win by being angry. I won by being thorough, by understanding that systems have rules, and when they break their own rules, there's a mechanism for holding them accountable. But only if someone bothers to use it. Only if someone decides that 17 minutes on a sidewalk matters, that truth matters. That the difference between what was claimed and what actually happened matters enough to document, to challenge, to refuse to let disappear into the category of things we just accept. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't the silence of people wishing she'd stop talking or wondering when this would be over. It was the silence of people actually thinking, actually reconsidering, actually beginning to understand that change didn't always look like revolution. Sometimes it looked like receipts, like audio logs, like knowing which forms to file and refusing to stop until someone had to respond. She didn't defeat the system by destroying it. She held it accountable by understanding it better than the people who thought they could hide behind it. That night, which should have been just another forgotten humiliation, another story someone might tell at a dinner party as evidence of how things are, became instead the beginning of something different. 17 minutes that changed policy. One woman who refused to let the lie become the record. And a city that learned, however reluctantly, that documentation is its own kind of power. She walked out of that forum into the cool evening air, past the cameras and the handshakes, and the people who suddenly wanted to talk to her. And she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not vindication exactly, not triumph, just the simple, solid weight of being heard, of being believed, of mattering enough that the truth about what happened to her became the truth in the record, in the policy, in the way things would be done differently from now on. She pulled out her phone as she walked toward the bus stop, found the video from that night, still saved in her messages, watched herself standing on that sidewalk for just a moment, the lights flashing, her hands on the hood of the patrol car. Then she deleted it. She didn't need it anymore. The record was official now. If you like this story, leave a like and subscribe for more.